And now, the Harnessing the Power of Social Networking panel discussion, hosted by Brian Partridge of the Yankee Group.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon and welcome to our panel. You know, we've got a really great panel to kick off the afternoon session and get us prepared for Foreigner tonight. Our panel is called Harnessing the Power of Social Networking. My name is Brian Partridge. I'm Research Vice President at Yankee Group. If you don't know Yankee Group, we're a market research firm. We've been around for 40 years, and we're focused in the telecommunications industry. I'm honored that GENBAND has asked me to be here to lead this great panel that gives us a great mix of industry heavyweights and newcomers. At this point, I'd like to invite my esteemed panelists to join me on the stage. First, I'd like to call Lee Blaylock, founder and CEO of Whoat. Next, I'd like to call to the stage Adam Hanin, Senior Director, Industry Solutions at Salesforce.com. Next up, Fred Kemmerer, CTO, GENBAND. Next up, Rich Tarini, from the CEO of TMC. Next to the stage, Marco ten Vaanholt from SAP, Group Vice President, Head of Social Business Networks. Welcome. Okay, so to get us started, I wanted to make some brief introductory comments to set the context for our discussion today. Like any analyst worth his salt, I brought some data for us to look at. But before we get into looking at some data, I wanted just to make some general comments. So as the speakers have alluded to before me, it's not a stretch to say that social networking continues to advance in its reach and influence into our traditional communications domains, in particular in the business environment. Social networking and web-based communications have forever changed the face of communications value chain and the underlying business models. This trend only accelerates with new broadly based capabilities such as WebRTC and HTML5, which provide openly available tools for nearly anyone to build custom web-based communication services. And while some network owners have originally tried to limit these services or compete head-to-head, providers today are embracing a stance that is more likely to integrate these social networking tools into their users' communication experience to ensure that they still stay relevant and earn a strong position in the new communications value chain. Your customers are using these services every single day. I personally was tweeting all morning, updating Facebook as to the weather, my growing excitement for rocking out to Foreigner tonight. We're all doing this, and it's a growing trend for all of us. And I agree with Charlie when he says that we really find ourselves in the middle of a perfect storm. It's a perfect storm of challenge and opportunity. And the underlying components of this storm are powerful devices, awesome applications, most often delivered for free, and super fast networks. So I pulled a data cut from Yankee Group's latest consumer research survey. And essentially, this was a survey of US consumers talking about and asking a question around their usage of social applications. And what's not surprising is the usage of Facebook. So 60% daily usage of Facebook, nearly 80% on a weekly basis. But Twitter was surprising to me. 20% daily and almost 60% weekly usage of Twitter. Google Plus Google Plus, a little less popular, but still making a mark. So a quick audience poll. Who got wet last night? Got it. Raise your hand if you personally use Facebook every day. How about Twitter? Google Plus? A lot less. How about WhatsApp? And Skype? Good penetration for Skype. And then the last question, how many of you guys use those tools to get work done? Good percentage. So what is the real big picture for the telecommunications market as we sit here today? So what you're looking at is Yankee Group forecast for the United States consumer mobile services. And what we see here from a big picture perspective is traditional services are flat. And if you think that that's bad news, you're lucky that we're in the United States because the picture is a little bleaker in Western Europe and other parts of the world. But what we're really showing here is that the action and the revenue growth is in data services. And so we're showing from 2013 through 2017 an additional $20 billion in additional revenue growth to get to 60 to 80 billion at the end of the forecast. Another quick audience poll. How many people from the audience actually work for communication service providers? Okay, good half. And how many of the people that just put up their hand have more than 100,000 customers? Interesting. And how many expect to grow revenues over the next 5 years? Good. How many expect to lose revenue? Good. Every year, Yankee Group, there's 2 or 3 mega trends that we follow. And clearly, the number one for us this year is exploring the relationship between communication service provider and over-the-top providers. And the key questions that our clients are most interested in understanding are these providers our friend or are they our foe? And the answer is, as they usually always are, is nuanced. So the answer is yes or it's complicated. And for every operator, it's different. So certainly when you're thinking about the consumer messaging and voice marketplace, these over-the-top alternatives are certainly pulling minutes and messages away. But at the same time, the demand for these services are creating the demand for mobile internet data plans, and they're also creating new usage behaviors that really apply well into markets like the enterprise, where a facilities-based operator can bring additional value to the table. So we learn our new usage patterns as consumers, we bring it to the enterprise, which creates opportunity. And a lot of what we're going to be talking about on the panel today is really to focus on what those opportunities are and how to bring them to the fore. Here's an example where over-the-top had a truly negative impact on an operator. So we had an opportunity to do a case study on KPN last year using data from 2011. So what we found was, in truly stunning fashion, smartphone users on KPN went from 0% adoption of WhatsApp to 85% adoption in 8 months. So what you're looking at the left is that adoption of users on Android phones. On the right is the corresponding quarters to show minutes of use and actual message orientation. So when all the dust settled, what came of this is about 10% decrease in SMS traffic and a 5% decrease in revenues from non-bundled users. So another audience poll question. Who in this audience is concerned with the impact social media is having on their traditional voice and data business? Interesting. And who in this audience feels that their companies could be doing a better job of embracing social media to improve their customer value propositions? Good. So we have strategic options, what to do about this opportunity or threat, depending on the context that you're looking at it. So of course, you can beat them or you can join them, leveraging technologies like IMS, Rich Communication Services, and WebRTC. You can embrace them as true partners through setting up relationships like zero rating, WhatsApp, Facebook browsing, entering content relationships with companies like Spotify. A very interesting opportunity is to enable them. What assets, as a network facilities-based communication provider, can I bring to the table to add value to those over-the-top players, be it quality of service, inner working services, billing on behalf of, etc. And the last, and probably least attractive option, is to try to fight them, either directly by blocking these applications, which certainly has been tried but never flies, or through trying to work the regulatory channels. Again, potentially a short-term fix, but certainly not a long-term one that customers will appreciate. So, panel discussion topics that I'm interested in, and I hope that you are too, is really to talk about and think about how network owners should use such social networking features to grow profits. And really, what are the relationships that we need to build for everyone to get along? How should apps work with networks? And what are the assets that networks should bring? And then in particular, what is the technology impact of things like WebRTC and HTML5? And we also want to know what you want to talk about. So I'll pause and ask right now anyone in the audience if they'd like to add to this list of questions for this panel to address today. Any brave volunteers? Okay. So to get us started, what I'd like to do is go right down the line and ask each of these gentlemen to introduce themselves, their companies, and just provide some opening remarks on the topic of today.
Shall I start?
Sure.
Sure. Okay, great. So my name is Marketing Vaanholt. You had a great example. I'm Dutch. So, in Holland, social is actually one of the highest penetrations in society, together with Norway and Europe. So I head up one of the largest R&D divisions for SAP, focused on next generation social business networks. And it actually combines three philosophies that SAP has in its overall strategy in mobile, cloud, big data, as well as thinking about how companies in general that we sold to will manage their networks. So as you know, in the future, there is no possibility as a company to think insular around how you manage your business. You need to manage your entire network. And in order to do so, to communicate and collaborate, you will have to think about utilizing social networking pragmatically to connect the dots between your providers, your suppliers, as well as your customers. So in my teams, we're really focused on building next generation social networking tools to help companies connect, collaborate. Imagine that you're in a logistics business network and a ship is late, but it has an effect on the cranes, but also the trucks, as well as the manufacturer. What if you could create one single notification to all of the providers in their own way, and at that moment, they get the update and they can actually take the appropriate measurements. So that's a business network effect that utilizes collaboration and collaboration techniques as well as machine-to-machine operations to optimize the network appropriately. Another angle is this whole notion of moving from what we call now today e-commerce to social commerce to eventually commerce everywhere. So we see an increasing explosion of data, but the data in the future will be advanced data networks where there will be an increasing amount of what I call advanced data in context delivery. So imagine you're walking through a shopping mall. You won't just have the device that you have today. Most people will have glasses, Google Glasses, or next generation where there's 4K laser beams in your eyes, and at that moment, there will be content that will be delivered at that moment that is related to you, that matters to you in relationship to what you're doing. So a lot of the things that my teams are working on is specifically around social commerce and commerce everywhere. Last but not least, I'm working a lot on next generation sensor networks and the interaction between sensors and humans to sensors, and then sensors to sensors. So it has a lot of machine-to-machine implications. And there's also another opportunity there to think about predictive, prescriptive analytics as well as social graph analytics in utilizing that in order to make better business decisions. So we all do that in my business practice together with customers. It's a little bit of a new model. It's an incubation model. Often I talk about having about 12 startups within my teams and trying to co-innovate together with customers. And it's another model because normally SAP asks you to pay first. And in my model, we do a POC for free so that we can co-innovate, actually showcase the power of our in-memory database that's called HANA.
Great.
So in general, that's kind of like a wide variety of topics that get discussed and talked and thought about in my teams. And in many cases, I sit around with CIOs and CEOs of companies trying to do two things. And I do think it's important also to bring that into the discussion today. There's a true difference between what I call the B2C social premise as well as the B2B social premise. In the B2B space, it's more around knowledge networks, trying to get the right answer at the right time from the right people, but there might be multiple people, whereas in B2C social today, there is this still this notion that the answer can come from anywhere. I do believe that there is an evolution happening right now in social in general, where we're going to go from horizontal social to eventually vertical social, and then last but not least, context social. I see some companies in the valley, in Silicon Valley where I live, like a Crowd Optic, where you can hold your camera in front of a stadium and you're watching a football game, and you see all the comments of people that are watching the game, and it actually enhances the experience of the game. So that's what I mean with context social.
Got it.
So those are kind of like the wide variety of topics that my teams are working on. A very interesting space.
Great. Rich?
So my name is Rich Tarani. I'm CEO of TMC. Most of you would probably know me from our website TMCnet or Internet Telephony Magazine or IT Expo. We like to think of ourselves as a next generation media company focusing on the really interesting disruptive technologies that will change our businesses in the future. We currently run conferences on WebRTC, HTML5, wearable computing or wearable technology, and M2M, and a bunch of others. And so I'd encourage you to go to my blog at tarani.com or go to TMCnet for more information. But before I pass the microphone on, I want to thank Charlie and GENBAND for inviting me here, because I think as a CEO of a media company, I have unbelievably unique perspective on how social media can disrupt existing business models, how it can enhance business models, how it can change business models, and also because of our focus on telecom for so many years, I think I kind of have this unique perspective of both of those markets, and I'm looking forward to speaking with you some more during this panel.
Thanks, Rich. Adam?
So, good afternoon. My name is Adam Hanin. I'm Senior Director of Industry Solutions at Salesforce.com. And the reason that I'm at Salesforce.com and in this role, my focus is the high-tech industry, is because I spent almost 25 years in the high-tech industry. I know I look a lot younger than that, but like all of you, right? I built my career in sales and mostly in marketing. And so I came to Salesforce to help Salesforce understand the needs of marketers in the technology space. And over the last decade or so, we've seen this growth in social and social media. And to give you an example, one of the things that Brian had asked was that we get a sense of what our companies are doing with social and in the space. To give you an example, I thought I'd take a slightly different tack. It's after lunch, you've been sitting all day, and so I'm going to do a poll too. But I'm going to ask you to get a little more involved. So if you have a mobile device with you, please stand. Okay, now this should be everybody because you all got mobile devices from Samsung, okay? So everybody stand. Okay, now, if you have more than 2 social media accounts, so Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, etc., remain standing. If not, please sit down. Okay, so we lost a few. Okay, so those are the folks we have to convert here. Okay, so everybody else has more than 2. If you feel, and this is where we're going to see, I think, some interesting things. If you feel that your company is doing a good job in managing relationships in social media with your customers, please stay standing, otherwise sit down. Okay. That's what Salesforce does. Probably everybody who's standing now is using Salesforce. But thank you, thank you. Salesforce helps enable companies to interact with your customers in new ways, to use the power of social media and bridge those gaps to provide better sales, better service, and better marketing capabilities. And that's what we do, because we see this gap, the gap that we just demonstrated in the room. And so that's what I'm looking forward to talking about with you today.
Excellent. Lee.
Hi, my name is Lee Blaylock. I'm the CEO of a company called Whoat. And you're thinking, who is that? Because you know Salesforce, you know SAP. We basically are building a platform to help you maximize the value of the contacts in your phone, and by extension, your company's Exchange server. The reason why we're here is GENBAND and Charlie and BG and the team have an unbelievable vision of how you can take applications, put them on top of what's being built, and deliver those and add a lot of value to your clients. And a lot of you are really worried about your revenue. You see an SMS go down, you see your voice go down, but the applications are what make people stick. And the folks at GENBAND really understand that, and I'm very thankful they asked me to be here. And I was going to have you do some poll, but I'm not going to do a poll. I'll just do one thing real quick. One of the things that we do is we help you compress the cycle time for an introduction or for a client referral. Think about this. Everybody came to this event wanting to network, right? The statistical probability that you meet the exact person or the best person that is the best person to meet here for your particular business interest is very, very low. So we have a technology called the name game, called the wish list, where my contacts can help you, your contacts can help me, and we have privacy filters that are either location enabled or we can network if you're in my phone or if you're in my company. And so we match wish lists where we can help each other, but do it in a private way that never reveals your ID until you're comfortable. We can talk about it later if you're interested. But that whole concept of now, when you come to a conference, you can actually meet somebody that's actually beneficial is very interesting. And my background's Dell and Oracle. This is the third startup I had. The last one is a company called Annandale Capital. It's a $500 million private client business. And we've got 2 Forbes 400 clients. And you all know the drill. You don't call up Bill Gates and say, "Hi, Bill, we'd like to manage your money," right? It's very private. It's very confidential. And so we're building a lot of those ethos into it. So social doesn't always have to be public. It can be collaborative. So,
Got it. And Fred?
Yeah, thanks. So GENBAND, by the way, I'm Fred Kemmerer, Chief Technology Officer at GENBAND. Based on conversations with our customers and partners, many of whom are sitting in this room here, about 2 years ago, we began to form an over-the-top and social networking strategy. It's very gratifying to all of us at GENBAND to see the first proof points of that announced here today, specifically our Spider product, WebRTC, and the HTML5 clients are very key elements of this strategy, as well as Newbie, our cloud-based offer, and the Innovation Exchange. This will not be about technology. The technology to make social networking valuable to both parties, the network operator and the social network, is the easy part. The hard part is the business model. And quite frankly, all the players are going to need to change significantly to make that work. I was really glad to see, Brian, your piece on the different business model options. I would suggest that it's not about a choice, except probably it's not wise to choose the last one, which is to try to fight it, because obviously that is partially about fighting your own customers and not something you ever want to do for any length of time. But I would suggest that the right business model is not one, it's all of them. And in fact, when we look at the players that are starting to succeed in this space, they're doing it by trying many different approaches and finding the ones that work. And it's not always the same one that works in every situation. And so one of the things that we're doing at GENBAND is we're thinking a lot, not only about the technology, the products, the solutions, many of which you saw begin to roll out today, but we're also trying to think about what business models will work, what tools we need to create value for the end user, which is what this is really all about, as well as to be able to make it profitable. When we think about those business models, we kind of follow Brian's models with a twist. The first stage is to just leverage the interest. You saw in the charts that were presented that many of us can't seem to stay off of Facebook, that we're almost checking it constantly. How many people in here have checked Facebook in the last hour? Or been on a social network somewhere in the last hour? Okay. So that's certainly the first base that our customers can use, simply to bring more traffic to their networks and bring more customers. The second stage is to create a better experience for those customers once they're there. And that is a differentiator that is significant. If you're using your mobile device maybe 60, 70% of the time to do social networking, then if you're working with an operator that's providing a better experience for you, you're much more likely to remain loyal to that operator. Secondly, there's the opportunity to create a blended experience and to make that whole environment seem seamless. But the third business model, I think, is the one that I'm most excited about, and that is to use social networking and over-the-top communications as a tool to build new user experiences. One more poll, and I promise we won't do any more. But how many of you or your children have ever tried to make content go viral or know what that means? How many are familiar with sort of content going viral? You've sort of seen this on TV programs and so on, where somebody will shoot an innocuous video on Facebook, and suddenly it ends up on the morning news, much to the chagrin usually of the people in the video. There's actually a whole process for doing that, and that's a very interesting user case that leverages 3 or 4 different social networks together to create that benefit for the end user, the notion of making that content become so popular that it ends up on the morning news. And I think as you look at some of what we're trying to create with our open platforms, our cloud-based approaches, and our innovation exchange, what you'll begin to see are the elements that will create those kinds of new opportunities. And quite frankly, I'm very optimistic that the carriers who are in a position to deliver that experience across a whole bunch of different environments are in an excellent position to capitalize on some of those things.
Excellent. I'm going to come back down this way and start with Lee. So splitting up capabilities between sort of business relationships and technical assets that a facilities-based network operator, so i.e. what most of the audience represents here today. From your perspective as a startup company, when you think about those 2 buckets, maybe start with the technology. What are the technical capabilities that the network owners can bring to your proposition that excites you?
Number one, it's a good data point. Speed is the answer. For every 1 millisecond of latency of Amazon, they lose $1 million a day in sales. Wow. So speed is key. Speed is everything as it relates to the user experience. So that's obviously one thing. So as 4G, LTE moves, that's extremely important. What they also have is the ability to get to millions of users. And companies, especially early stage companies or early companies, they want to get distribution. And so that billing relationship with the customer, that ability to have a brand, a trusted brand, and the ability to deliver a flawless experience as it relates to a speedy app experience is extremely important.
Okay. Adam, same question to you.
Yeah, I think I would echo what Lee just said. I think trust is key here, right? If your customers don't trust you as a company, then you're going to lose business. And that trust is reflected in everything from the technology that you have running your business to the way that you interact with your customers. So it's a business model, it's a process, a business process, and it's the technology, all rolled together.
Okay. And so specifically, how about things like quality of service?
I'm sorry?
Quality of service?
So quality of service is key, right? I mean, that's, as Lee said, that's the delivery of the connectivity, making sure that you've got speed, which is what your customers expect, service from that perspective. There's service from a customer service perspective as well, right? But I think this audience is probably more concerned with the speed of the network. And if that speed isn't there, if you don't enjoy that experience that you have with any company, if it's degraded in any way, then the trust is gone. And this is a trust revolution in social. This is what we're all about.
Okay. Rich, I'll come back to you in 1 second. But Marco, what's your perspective?
Two things. I think, well, I echo what you guys were saying, but I think what's very important for the carriers to understand is that as they progress, they don't have to only think of themselves as a carrier, but also from a telco to a softco. Mm-hmm. So how you sell, how you engage, how you deliver. I can imagine that a lot of you, even in the audience, are thinking about this. So, you know, we used to be carriers, and this is how our business model was. Mm-hmm. But if you want to become a software company, whether you merge with some OTT providers, or you build it yourselves, or you integrate with SAP and do it that way, there is an increasing trend to figure out how to get there. The ones that will win actually will have that ability and that adaptability to move into the softco space. So besides speed and reliability and so on, I think that's an important element, but figuring out how you can become a software company as well is going to be increasingly important for most of the telcos that are out there.
Got it. Rich, you've got a really interesting position in the ecosystem. So I'm wondering if you could share with the audience any examples or perspectives that you've been able to gather in your discussions that are showing leadership in either developing their organization to take advantage of this new changing world, or developing new business models, relationships, and so forth. Have you seen anything interesting?
I've seen carriers over the last few years try to become more nimble, open up APIs, things like that. The challenge is that the culture of the carrier is generally so different than the culture of the 10 or 15 person startup that writes an app that a lot of times the good ideas just die on the vine and they just don't make it out there. But what we have to realize as an industry is that 20 years ago, the carrier owned so much and they own so little right now. And what I mean by that is they owned all the phone numbers, and I had to use the carrier-owned phone number to get a hold of someone else I wanted to speak with in my network. But now, most people don't even know the phone numbers that they call, and a lot of people, especially 30 and under, don't even use the phone. And they'll maybe use texting, or they'll use VoIP or something like that. The point is that this relationship has been lost over the last couple decades, and carriers should realize that if they don't somehow get involved in that relationship and at least try to hold on to it, that they risk losing a lot. And we're also at a very pivotal moment in the evolution of technology, because WebRTC more or less opens up the landscape in telecom where anybody and everybody can recreate Skype instantaneously and allow browser-to-browser communications, meaning that if Skype is the biggest problem on your network, you can instantaneously provide a low-cost competitor to Skype that hooks into your network, that hooks into your services. I mean, there are just so many opportunities right now. So carriers have to do a couple things. They have to deal with their culture, which means maybe working with an outside company that does some of this work for them. Right. And they also have to have a vision as to how am I going to take back some of this control? Will I be the central hub? I mean, I think if I'm a carrier, the scariest thing that happened this last month is that Facebook launched Home, which is their goal to kind of take over the smartphone and own the entire smartphone experience. My God. Right. I mean, it's gone from bad to worse for carriers, and it seems like they're not as concerned about it as I am, and I don't know if I'm just too forward-looking or maybe I just panic easily, but that's my feeling on the topic.
Got it. Fred, I want to go back to you because you made some announcements today specifically about WebRTC technology. In your conversation with customers who are thinking about their role in that new world that Rich just described, what are the sorts of things that you're either guiding them to do or the sort of challenges that you're positioning for them to overcome?
Yeah, great question. So There are two real aspects to WebRTC that are important. First of all, we understand, I think many of the folks in the audience understand, that communications are becoming contextual. We don't necessarily dial up an old friend just because we suddenly think of them. We're more likely to do that these days because we happen to stumble across them on Facebook, and we'd love to chat with them even though maybe we haven't seen them in many years. Or we're researching a new product or a service on a company website, and we suddenly find that the information that is not there, and at that point in time, we'd love to talk to a company representative and understand that product better and maybe make a purchase. WebRTC is a key tool for enabling those types of contextual communications and embedding them not only on web pages that we would see through smartphones and PCs and so on, computers, but also on many of the devices that we use, like our television sets, our gaming systems, and perhaps a whole range of new devices that we haven't even thought about yet. The other thing that's very interesting about WebRTC is it solves perhaps one of the most important barriers that many in the room face as we expand in this new world, and that's one of scale. We've typically built the communications industry, and enterprises have done this to some degree too, within the bounds of our physical network, where we have locations, where we built our access network, and so on. One of the problems that we're facing is many of the new business models are attracting sources of indirect revenue where the scale of the customer base is the key differentiator. And as big as many of the operators are in this room, nobody's quite big enough to be on the scale of the internet. And so one of the other things that WebRTC and some of the things that we're creating around it, our cloud-based solutions and so on do, is it gives the carrier to take their service, the ability to take their service footprint and their loyal customer base and leverage it over much larger geographies. And as we think about some of the business model problems that the industry is encountering, things like attracting indirect revenues, advertising, leveraging analytics, and so on, that scale up is very, very important.
Got it. I'm going to pause here and see if there's any questions from the audience we can address. Any brave souls out there with a question? Yeah, right over there.
Oh, sorry, I have a mic. Okay. Customer care, contact center, and social. 2-3 years we've been talking about it. It hasn't been happening as quickly as we thought it might. Any thoughts from the panel?
Adam?
Yeah, let me address that directly, because it's one of the things that I think we've seen at Salesforce as the next big thing. And frankly, it already has started to happen. One of the issues that we face, as any company faces right now, is that with the strength of Google and Yahoo and the other search engines and the strength of social networks, customers are starting to go to those sources rather than to companies for customer support, right? Quick show of hands. How many of you have recently had a technology problem and went to Google to find the answer, right? I mean, you didn't call the company that you had the problem with. You didn't contact them. So companies are struggling with how to address that. And one of the ways to do that is to actually integrate social media into the service platform, which is something that we've done, so that a service person in a call center can see somebody commenting on their company's product, saying, I'm having a problem with product XYZ. They can immediately take that tweet, let's say, and make it a case and respond to it within Salesforce, but the customer sees that response in Twitter, in this case. So we're seeing that, our customers are seeing that, and we're embedding that technology in everything we do. We can even now start to bring, as we talk about video and Skype and FaceTime and all the other capabilities, we can bring that technology directly into the customer service platform, so that a customer, if they have an issue and they happen to have a competitive product to the Samsung product that runs a different operating system and is named after a fruit, if they happen to have that device and they're having problems with a physical product, we can actually bring up a FaceTime interface with that customer, and they can show us the problem. So we're trying to address that, and hopefully that addresses your question.
Thanks, Adam. Any other questions from the audience? One over there.
On the question about social networking, you know, the social sites don't have the carrier-grade 5 nines reliability, security aspects built in. You know, Skype has had outages, and there's been other hacks. That's not the case with the telco world, as we know. But then you look at the telco world, the idea of new innovative services have been talked about for decades. I don't know if anyone remembers TINA-C, Corba-based APIs, then Parlay, ParlayX. You know, then it morphed into IMS, Rich Communication Suite, Join Initiative, but not a whole lot of real deployments at the end of the day. I mean, even Join has had some issues. Deutsche Telekom has already indicated that they've delayed things a year. Verizon has already delayed their VoLTE launch by a year based on issues with IMS. Do you see the same thing with WebRTC, that, you know, while it sounds great, but pragmatism will have to prevail?
I'd like to make a comment on that, and then I'll hand it off to the panel. The difference with WebRTC is it's a standard that's being driven through the web world, if you will, so the Googles, which tend to, well, first of all, bring a lot more scale to the equation, and frankly, a better track record of getting those sorts of standards out there and quickly, and we're already starting to see the traction on it. And the fact that it's really based on launching a suite of communications applications from standard browser technology really eliminates many of the barriers that the telecom industry has faced in the past with regards to over-engineering complex platforms like IMS and so forth. So I think the interesting question is, what is the real impact of WebRTC for the traditional network, so the traditional audience that's here for network owners? And I would argue that it's more opportunity than challenge. Yes, is there going to be a challenge to have more over-the-top, quote-unquote, players eating away at minutes? Yes, but that's a challenge that's sort of well understood. But what's more interesting is to think about, as a telecom operator, the assets that they can bring to that community of new WebRTC players in order to interconnect to the greatest amount of other networks, which is a traditional area of strength. I'll pass it to Rich.
So I would agree with everything you said. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, TMC actually runs a WebRTC Expo, and our next one is this summer in Atlanta in a few months. And the last one was November, Santa Clara. We saw at least 5 demos of WebRTC running. So on the desktop, peer-to-peer, it runs great. Browser-to-browser, no problem. The challenge could potentially be integration with the back-end existing IMS infrastructure. But even those challenges, we saw a number of companies at the Expo showing demos of session border controllers running with WebRTC. So I'd say we're not ready for full large-scale deployments. In fact, not every browser even runs WebRTC. Currently, Google Chrome does, and Mozilla's Firefox does. But within the next few years, I think WebRTC is going to be a force to be reckoned with. It will have some challenges like every other technology, but it's so far along that carriers are going to have to move based on the fear and greed of the market. So there's going to be fear that other carriers are going to jump ahead of them, and the greed that they're actually going to be able to take advantage of this technology to potentially generate revenue from parts of the market that used to just ride over their network over the top for free.
Fred?
Yeah, I think one other thing to understand about WebRTC and internet-based social communications in general is that the quality of the user experience and the interface will often trump the quality of the actual connection. If you think about what happened with the music industry when the whole digital music revolution happened, we saw increasingly better formats. Anybody remember high-definition DVDs and high-definition audio discs and all that? That was sort of the last gasp of the quality-based argument for music audio. But what we found was better user interfaces to find the music and ease of getting it ultimately trumped what were vastly superior standards in terms of the quality of the delivery. I think WebRTC will be something like that. And certainly we're seeing work go on where WebRTC is being used to front-end IMS. GENBAND just participated in an activity in Addis where we created the world's first IMS-compliant WebRTC implementation. And so it doesn't have to be an either-or, but the real opportunity in doing that is to take that technology and use the environment in a web browser to build a truly superior user interface and experience, I think.
Yeah, Marco.
I think you also have to look at it from a business perspective. I always start thinking first from a business perspective and then carry it back. If social matters to the business, they will go forward and integrate it, whether it's in customer care, customer service, customer sales. So that's the first component. The second component that you didn't touch upon yet, Fred, is I think carriers have a big opportunity. I'm working with Singtel, for instance, in Singapore, largest Singapore telco provider, to actually use their data. And I haven't talked, I haven't heard you guys talk about this yet, but I believe that for a lot of telcos, there's an incredible opportunity because you carry the packages, you carry the data, to actually use that data, whether it's anonymized or whether it's used and scraped a little bit, and then you can sell it. I haven't really heard anything about that, but it's actually a big business opportunity beyond WebRTC, because I believe that that will happen, or next version of WebRTC, there will be end-way communication. But the business model of using data as a vehicle to expand your business in many different formats and ways, if you think about the next generation of content, context-sensitive data that's delivered on time in the real way at the moment that you need it as a person, there's an opportunity.
Marco, a lot of times when we've had those sorts of conversations, there's a real reticence to think about how that data may be leveraged and monetized northbound and upstream and downstream. And I'm wondering, are there any thoughts you can share with the audience who may have that very challenge about that issue? So protecting the data, ensuring you're not breaking privacy laws, and you're not, worst of all, breaking that bond of trust that your brand has with customers if something were to go wrong.
Yeah, the way we're doing it in Singapore specifically, and now Singapore is a little bit of an odd duckling, but they are the future city. But they don't care that much about privacy. So you have to kind of figure out a balance. But I'm working with a third-party nonprofit organization that gets the Singtel data. But also the government is working to provide data.gov type of data. And they're trying to do it in a way that helps the citizens. So actually, you're sitting on a bunch of gold. That is your gold. And if you think about, historically, it was the telephone numbers and the directory services, and you knew that person. And now, actually, you do know what that person is doing. That's even better gold, right, if you really think about it. Now, if you can use that in order to help people, whether it's via a government way or perhaps in the future when people are a little bit more comfortable with it, using it in a way that it enhances their lives. Okay, let's talk about Lee's company, Whoet. Well, he says, now I can do voice over IP. I asked him, why do I need to do voice over IP? I just immediately want to do FaceTime. Right. Because then I know who you are. Right? I can immediately have a quick conversation, let's meet at the bathroom, or let's meet on stage, or let's meet here. So there's this opportunity that you can have. And with commerce everywhere, if you think about the future of commerce everywhere, you can use that data. And I was actually having a discussion with Kumud Kali, who's the CTO of Akamai. Similarly, he's sitting on all the data of the internet, or most of the data. So actually, I kind of urge you to think also about your data and using that data for either the benefits of the citizens, or in the future, as people get more comfortable with it, for commercial purposes.
Very good. Any other questions from the audience? I think that the audience would really appreciate a little bit more color from each of the panelists on the business model challenge. As we're all very well aware, that is always the stumbling block that gets in the way, in particular in the telecom industry, of a lot of interesting innovations happening between over-the-top providers and facilities-based operators. It's somewhat been technology challenged in terms of the complexity of APIs that were exposed. Some of it's been related to not really understanding things like a developer ecosystem and how to matriculate that, develop it, and actually monetize it. So what can we share with the audience to really help them think about what they can do better to incent participation from social-based companies? And we'll start with Lee.
I'll give you an interesting statistic. Fortune magazine, 1965, Fortune 500, 67% are gone. Think about that. A&P Grocery, the Walmart of the day, gone. Dow Original 30 Industrial Average, only one company's left, and that's General Electric. If you've ever heard of Clayton Christensen, he writes a really interesting book called The Innovator's Dilemma. And a guy named Andy Grove, who's not too smart, but he was one of the founders of Intel, he says it's the most important book he ever read in business. And I really urge you all that are thinking about this issue to really understand that this actually is a really interesting time for an opportunity, because you have the customers, you have the distribution, you have the most important piece, which, as I mentioned earlier, which is speed, right? And you're driving that, and you're working with GENBAND to increase that even more. And so think about how do you create value, and the value creation, guys, is in the apps world. It is in not just over the top where you're, Skype and Fring and some really cool stuff, but applications that actually anchor your customers to your platform. Because if you can do that, then you start to control a lot of things, and Apple figured that out. Salesforce has done a great job figuring out the App Store, right? I know there have been app stores that have been tried in the carrier side, but that doesn't, and some have been successful, some not so. But when you control the app ecosystem, now you've got a platform that other people want to develop for, and now you've got outsourced R&D, and you've got applications being developed on your platform, and that makes you relevant in a very, very long-term situation.
Got it. How about Adam?
Well, I would suggest that with any business model, you start with the customer. Right? What is it that's most important to the customer themselves? Because you're going to learn a lot. Right? If you don't ask your customers what they want, you don't know. You deliver what you think they want. So I would suggest start there. I absolutely agree that the owning the app is key, or understanding how the app works and making sure that you're taking advantage of that in the network. But really, fundamentally, it just comes down to understanding the customer need and meeting or exceeding that.
Okay. Rich?
I agree with a lot of what's been said up here, but I also want to take a step back. Some of the things we talked about a little bit earlier, you mentioned actually was basically the data. Carriers have a lot of data. They have access to a lot of information that apps may not have access to, and there is the potential to work with some of the app vendors to take their business to the next level in a win-win scenario where maybe that collaboration would be good for marketers. The marketers may pay for it. Maybe customers, the free customers of these over-the-top apps might pay for some kind of premium service. I mean, it's just a matter of looking at the second tier of company, and in some cases the first tier of company, to work with them. And there's also the potential to work with some of these over-the-top companies to develop special bundles. Let's say a Twitter bundle, any name your social network bundle. Right. To try to get a hold of the younger demographic and try to come up with these differentiators in the market.
Got it.
On top of what you just said, I think there is another opportunity around sensor networks. So we only have 7 billion smart devices, or a little bit more, about 10 billion we say, but some market reports have 50 billion by 2020. I actually believe it's much more. It's probably more than 1 trillion. If you think about smart cars, smart vending machines, smart sensors already in mining equipment or machinery on manufacturing sites, there's a humongous opportunity actually to think about that socially as well, because these smart devices will start talking to each other. They already, in some cases, do. So there's an opportunity to actually think beyond WebRTC and so on, to also provide speed, but also quality, and then last but not least, the data transmission, and utilizing that data with in-memory techniques to do a real-time content delivery.
Very good. We're getting the virtualized hook, so we're up at the end of our time. I'd like to thank all the panelists for a very engaging discussion. I really appreciate it. Let's give them a hand. I'm pretty sure, for the most part, everybody that was participating in the panel today will be around. So if there's questions that you wanted to either discuss one-on-one or just didn't have an opportunity to ask, please approach any of us, and we're happy to have that conversation offline. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Cheers.